Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Secretary, we talk a lot about energy, and most people think of oil and gas and coal and solar and wind, but a huge part of our energy structure is the electric grid, the system we use to transmit electricity to our homes and businesses. Now, our electrical grid has been so reliable that for the most part, no one even thinks about it. But the grid is aging. The basic design elements of the grid date back to Thomas Edison, and major parts of today's grid were built right after World War II. One report indicates that utilities will need to spend between $1.5 and $2 trillion by 2030 just to maintain reliable electric service. Now, Mr. Secretary, your budget request includes what you call cross-cutting initiatives to improve the reliability and the resiliency of the grid. Could you walk us through these new initiatives and talk just a little bit about the department's plans for improving the grid?
Yes, thank you. And of course, not surprisingly, this will be one of the major focus areas for the Quadrennial Energy Review that we hope to be discussing with you soon. So in the budget, we propose $356 million for the Grid Modernization Initiative. It's a substantial increase because of the importance that we attach to it, as do you. The program, it's cross-cutting in two senses. Or maybe three senses. One is that within DOE, there are multiple program offices that contribute in different ways to the project. Office of Electricity and Reliability, of course, but also the Renewable Energy Office because of the integration issues, our policy office, et cetera. So the program will span everything from very fundamental technology development, like new wide bandgap semiconductors for power electronics, to system analyses. How do you integrate over large geographical areas?
So let me ask just a little bit. Let me push down on one part of that. Sure. One threat to the reliability of the grid is extreme weather.
Yes.
You know, heat waves make electric generation, transmission, distribution more difficult. They create potentials for brownouts and blackouts. Recent report from the GAO focused on the risks that severe weather pose for our power grid. And the report goes on to say that two broad ways that we can reduce the impact of extreme weather on energy infrastructure is to invest in hardening and resiliency. So we can harden the infrastructure by making physical changes so it stands up better to extreme weather, and we can make it more resilient by making changes so that it recovers more quickly when some components are damaged and damage to the external systems. Now, a new study from the World Bank also suggests that when there's more diversity of energy sources, including more renewable energy connected to the grid, it will improve the resiliency of our electricity sector, even in the face of weather extremes. And a Commonwealth of Massachusetts climate change adaptation report from 2011 also recommended diversifying energy supplies as a potential strategy to make our system less prone to failures. Can you explain a little bit to us about why that is and what DOE is doing here?
Yes. So again, two different issues. One is the issue in terms of the high voltage transmission grid, and there, for example, using Recovery Act money, we worked with the utilities to deploy at some scale a new technology called synchro phasers. So the idea,
sounds cool.
Yeah. So the idea, it is cool, and so it really gives you a lot of information about the status of the grid. And now the idea is we have to still work to get those data to become a decision-making tool, real time, to prevent issues. But then if we go to the distribution end, that's where, for example, distributed generation, that would include, for example, solar is a good example. Distributed generation and microgrids are themselves a resiliency tool. Yes. Okay, and I'll give you one example where we actually did something concrete following Sandy, and of course, we have a lot of energy infrastructure that is coastal and susceptible to storm surges, et cetera. So in Sandy, in the recovery, rather than trying to recover what we had, we spent a very small amount of money, cost shared with New Jersey, to design a very substantial so-called microgrid. It's not so micro, but a microgrid that would provide resilience for a key electrified transportation corridor, so that even if the big grid was going out, you might be able to isolate this. And of course, having a transportation corridor available is really important for public safety.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. You know, the impact of extreme weather on the grid reliability is a problem for everybody who uses electricity. And we're facing more extreme weather events. As of this morning, we are more than 77 inches of snow in Boston. You knew I was going to get to this, and that it's due to start snowing again this afternoon. These extreme weather events threaten our electricity infrastructure and make it even more important that we invest in upgrading and protecting the grid. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I'll have a firsthand view of that snow this weekend
I
in
know
Boston.
you will.
And actually, I just say that one of the contributing things here is the extraordinarily high temperature right now of the water around Boston is contributing a lot of the moisture. So